Hey, welcome to our Midweek Connection. You know, in the book of Matthew, in the 5th chapter, Jesus began what he called a Sermon on the Mount. And along down in that 5th chapter, Jesus talks about us being the light of the world. The light of the world. And then he talks about, you know, you don't set a light up for people to see and then put a basket over it. You keep that light so that the world can see the light that shines. And so Jesus is basically telling us to shine. And that's what we want to do. And we shine by our good deeds, by our acting like him, by our living out his teachings through our lives on a daily basis. And when we're talking about light, we're not just talking about a visible light. We can be a light by our speech and by our conversations over the phone, on Facebook, through email or texting or whatever other weird thing they got out there now to send communication. One of the qualities of light, you see, is to illuminate understanding. You may have said it yourself. I know I have. Let me bring a little more light to the subject here that we're talking about. Meaning we want to bring a bit more understanding to what might be going on. Have you been paying much attention these days to the kind of speech you've been using? Has your speech brought light to situations, or maybe it's been negative and hasn't been as positive as it should be? Many times we can damage our witness for the Lord because we have allowed our speech to be less than Christ-like. And we need to ask ourselves the question, are we using our light as effectively as we can in our situations at home, at school, at work, at play, wherever we might be, at church even? Are we using our light effectively for the Lord? There's no story that's told of a man who was walking in town one night, and it was pretty dark. Only the illumination of the street lights were there, and he saw a man searching for something near one of these street lights. And so he walked up to the man and asked him what he was looking for, and the guy said, well, I lost my watch. And the guy said, wow, where were you standing when you dropped it? And the fella who continued to look for his watch on the ground there pointed over in the other direction. He said, over there. Kind of befuddled, the guy said, well, why are you looking for your watch right here when you lost it over there? And the guy said, well, looked up and said, well, the light's better here. Kind of a silly story. But it's talking, how are we using our light effectively? Is it helping us, or are we hindering it? How are we effectively allowing the light of Jesus shine through us to our world? When you get up in the morning, do you ever think about how you're going to effectively allow your light to shine for Jesus that day? Probably not. I think this is something that has to be intentional that we do every day, because Jesus said that we are the light of the world. His light shining through us to our world and being a testimony for him. It just has to be intentional. Every day I get up, Lord, what new opportunities do you have for me today to let my light shine for you? And you know, I think sometimes we may let our light shine, and it may shine into somebody's life. We might not have been intentional about it, but if we're really thinking about letting our light shine and being who he wants us to be, then I think our light does shine. And like I said, sometimes people may see it and it may really speak into their lives. So intentionally or unintentionally, we need to make sure that we are letting our light shine for Jesus in whatever circumstances we might be in. And you know, we sure get tested from time to time, don't we, with the circumstances of life. Let's always make sure that we're reflecting the light of Christ through us to our world. Well, I hope that's helpful to you. I hope you can be able to do something with it. Don't go searching for your watch where it's not, just because you got better light. Make sure that you're being what Christ wants you to be. So for now, I'll say, God bless, stay narrow, happy trails.